start, Amy, can you raise your hand? I'm going to put you on the spot. So if anyone has any questions for Germany, talk to her during the break. All right. Well, it gives me pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Michael Berkshire. Michael is here from Chicago. He is the Green Projects Administrator for the Department of Housing and Economic Development. He works to create and implement public policy and incentives that encourage sustainable urban development. Chicago has been a global leader in green roofs, and even though we hate to admit it because we're always in a competition with someone, we really admire the advances that they've been able to make and look to learn from them. He has led the development of a policy that has required the construction of over 350 green roofs, totaling 5.5 million square feet of vegetated cover. And he just told me of their goal, and I can't remember the exact number, but we really have a lot to learn and hopefully partner in our learning with them. So please welcome Michael.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to thank Linda for inviting me here today and Matt for coordinating this. And I look forward to spending time in Germany with Amy. I'm also going to be in Hamburg with my uncle and my aunt, which is going to be interesting. But I always jump at the chance to come to Portland. This is my 5th time, and usually I am here for conferences. Throughout my career, I've worked on several types of sustainable issues, and I started out in solid waste management or garbage management. And we've always looked towards Portland for all of the innovation in a lot of areas of sustainability, whether it be solid waste or land use planning. Now you're doing wonderful things in solar, which we're going to be following your lead on. And as always in green roofs. And with Tom Lipton, he's been one of the most innovative and creative leaders globally in the green roof movement for years. And I've always looked very closely at what all of you are doing here. So I'm very excited to be here today and to also share some things that have been happening in Chicago. This morning I'm going to focus on the tools that we have used to we've been kind of a leader in green roofs and in the square footage anyway. And then talk about a few of the things that we're going to be doing in the future and some of the planning efforts that are still pushing us to go in this direction. And then in the end, I'm going to briefly talk about an analysis that we just completed to find out actually how many green roofs we have. And sorry, Tom, you've seen this presentation or variations of it several times, so I hope he doesn't get too bored. And then I'm going to end with a few projects that I'm going to talk about because I feel that they're very innovative ways that developers have used or have implemented green roofs. They were all required, but they've really used them to really enhance the projects. So I have 3 projects that I want to briefly present to you. As always, I like this to be really kind of laid back. So if I say something that some of you don't understand, or if I misstate something, please interrupt me, and hopefully we'll have time and I won't go over my time limit. But this is a slide that I always like to start out with. This is our green roof on City Hall. It has become kind of an icon of our sustainability movement. It was one of the first green roofs. Maybe some of you have heard the story that the former Mayor Daley, in the mid-90s, we had a terrible brownout, and over 700 people died during that brownout. And we received a huge settlement from our utility, but we also entered into a research project with the federal EPA to look at ways to lower urban temperatures. Because we had experienced, I believe it was 7 days of temperatures over 100 degrees when that brownout occurred. And one of the strategies, especially in a densely developed city like Chicago, are green roofs. And so that kind of started Mayor Daley thinking about green roofs, and then he did do a lot of international traveling, especially in Germany, and saw how extensively they were being used. So he came back and he said, let's put one on City Hall. Let's see how effective they can be in Chicago in terms of our climate, both our natural climate, but also our political climate. And it really has been a really beautiful and successful project. So in terms of the tools that we've used in the last, well, that green roof was actually built in 2000. And at that point, we started asking the private sector to also try to incorporate green roofs. But we did end up, we placed green roofs on about a dozen municipal buildings. And we tested all of the different types. We used the tray systems and the fully integrated systems just to see if, which one would be better, but also just to have some demonstration of all the different technologies that were available back then. But in 2004, after we did prove that, they were thriving, our climate, it's pretty harsh, it's pretty cold in the winter, can get very hot in the summer. But we were proving that they were living and thriving in Chicago. So we then decided to start asking the private sector to incorporate them into their projects. And the first policy, or the first stick that we implemented, was our sustainable development policy. And I'll talk about it more in a minute, but one of my favorite projects coming out of that, shortly after we implemented it, this is the Target store on Peterson, on the southwest side of Chicago. It's the first LEED certified Target store, and it has a 50% green roof, and that is only because we required it, because this is way back, I believe, in 2005, and at that point Target wasn't even, I don't even think they knew what the word sustainability meant, but now they really tout themselves as sustainable leaders. But I think that it was partially because we pushed them way back then, because it was quite a battle. And we also worked with them. It was kind of interesting. It's one of their first kind of urban stores where they brought the store up to the street. All the parking is underneath, and the store is actually on the second level, so the parking is underneath the store. And so there are a lot of fun things that we worked with them on that project. But how the sustainable development policy works is that any project that receives financial assistance from the city, we use TIF financing, tax increment financing, on a lot of projects. We've spent multiple billions of dollars investing in projects throughout the city through our TIF program. Also, if you're buying land at a reduced price from the city, you're subjected to this policy. We use tax credits a lot for both landmark buildings as well as industrial projects. So any of those projects, we require certain sustainable strategies be followed, and also projects that are coming to us for particular zoning assistance. And what we call them planned developments. So projects that exceed a certain size, whether it be height, square footage, number of units, and they're not typically allowed for through the zoning policy. They have to come through us through our plan development process. We review the projects, we make recommendations to our plan commission, and then the plan commission makes recommendations to our city council. And the ordinance a new ordinance actually has to be written to allow a project through this process. And plan developments also include any project along our rivers and in our lakefront protection area. So it really is quite a few projects in the end. It's probably close to around 500 projects a year that are impacted through that plan development process. So any of those, we require a certain amount of sustainability. And it also is categorized by the type of project. So residential projects have different requirements than industrial or commercial projects. So I think everyone can see it. These are the requirements for residential projects. So you can see that, for instance, 4 or more market rate units. So any project that has 4 or more units, if they're receiving TIF assistance, the requirement is that 100% of their roof be vegetated and that they have to achieve some level of building certification. And for building certification, they can choose either Energy Star certification or LEED certification. So that is how the project works, or that's how the policy works. It was first implemented in June of 2004. So it's been a little over 9 years that we've had this in process. And at the end of, towards the end of my presentation this morning, I'm going to be talking about the success of this policy. Another stick or another ordinance that we've had since 2008 is our Stormwater Ordinance. It's very simple. It's a performance-based ordinance rather than prescriptive. It requires any project over 15,000 square feet to keep a ½ inch of rain on site, or they have to increase the permeability of the site by 15% from existing conditions. So very simple ordinance, and we don't tell them how to do it. They just have to provide a plan, a stormwater plan, during the permitting process that describes and calculates how they're either meeting the increase in permeability or keeping a ½ inch of rain on site. So with that, we, you know, a lot of projects we're seeing cisterns. We're seeing some new parkways that you guys have been using for years that accept bioretention areas within our parkway systems. I actually was walking around downtown last night and took a picture of one near the plaza, which is just, I can't believe how many cool projects you guys have out here. So those are the type of strategies that we're seeing being implemented through that ordinance. And again, that's been in place since 2008. So it's a fairly new ordinance. So those are our two regulations that have been very successful. In terms of incentives, we've had a Green Roof grant program. This was a small grant where we provided $10,000 for residential or small commercial projects. So commercial buildings under 10,000 square feet could qualify. It was a competitive application process. We had this in place in 2005, 2006, and 2007. During those 3 years, we gave out, we distributed 75 grants, but unfortunately only half of those projects were constructed. Many of the projects, the residents found that, you know, the structural requirements that were needed, or, you know, the extra structure that they needed just made it economically not feasible. So unfortunately, even though we had a lot of applications every year, it was very difficult to actually review those applications because they're all lovely. But only half in the end were completed. We had a Green Roof Improvement Fund, which we affectionately called the GRIFT TIF. It was the Central Loop TIF district, so the downtown area of the city of Chicago. We were providing a 50% match for any existing building that would place a green roof on their building, up to $100,000 per project. I thought that was pretty wonderful, pretty substantial incentive. In the 3 years that it was in place, because the TIF didn't expire in 2008, we only had one application. And I went to every group that I could possibly find to talk to. BOMA, Building Owners and Management Association, 90% of the buildings in downtown Chicago are members of BOMA. I went to speak at all their luncheons. Real estate associations. We have a lot of very active associations, and I stumped this everywhere. And in the end, we only had one application. It was a condominium in the downtown. I believe it was about 20,000 square feet. So again, not one of the most successful programs ever. And we did not replicate it in any of the other TIF districts just because it wasn't very successful. We also have a density bonus, which I believe Portland's had for quite a while. It's a very complicated calculation. It's not for every square foot of green roof you get an extra square foot of building. It is complicated, but since I believe this has been in place since 2007, we've probably had between a dozen to 20 projects take advantage of this density bonus. And I'm sorry I don't have better data, but we have not done a very good job of tracking how many projects have received this or have gone for this density bonus. The photo of this building, that is 111 South Wacker, which is one of my favorite buildings in downtown Chicago. It's a LEED Gold. It recently sold, and it was the highest price per square foot of Class A office building, and I think it's because of the LEED certification. A German company actually bought that building. Another incentive is our Small Business Improvement Fund. This is a map of the city of Chicago, and all of the areas that are crosshatched in, what is that, purple, are small business improvement districts. And so if you're a business in one of those districts, you can receive a grant for certain strategies, and green roofs do apply to that. It's a sliding scale, so depending on how small your business is, how many employees you have, and how profitable you are, it depends on how much assistance you can get. It's anywhere from 25% to 75% of the cost of a green roof. So it's been a really successful program as well. We also have an open space impact fee credit. Any project in Chicago that includes new residential units, they have to either provide new open space or they have to pay into this open space credit fee. But if you place a green roof on your project that is open to all of the residents of that building or the general public, you receive a credit on that open space impact fee, and it can be very substantial. And I'm going to show a project later in the presentation that took advantage of this, and you can see how substantial that program is. This is about 4 years old, and it has been pretty successful. We also have the green permitting program, which I believe Portland's had in place. Linda, you've had it for quite a while as well, right? Yeah, and again, it's very simple. If your building qualifies as a green building under this process, you, instead of the typical 60 to 90 days that you can spend in our permitting office, we promise that your project will be reviewed and approved in 30 days or less. And we've tried to keep that. Not all, it's not just the city, it's also the applicant that has to provide the information at the right time. But it has been very successful in promoting LEED certification as well as green roofs. Because part of the qualification process is that you have to have a couple of menu items. You not only have to be LEED certified, but you also have to choose from a list of menu items. And a green roof is one of the menu items that you can choose from. And if it is a project that is required to have a green roof through the Sustainable Development Policy, they have to increase the square footage or the percentage of the roof that is covered in order to qualify for this incentive. So we've worked very closely with the building department to make sure. And in terms of planning that we've completed that will further encourage green roofs, one is our climate action plan. We have aggressive goals. We have 25% reduction in our greenhouse gases from 1990 levels by 2020, and 80% reduction by 2050. What's interesting in Chicago, which might be a little different from Portland, but maybe not, is that the research that we conducted preparing for this plan, we found that 70% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from electricity used in buildings. That's a little higher than our suburban counterparts in Chicago. A lot more of their footprint comes from transportation. But we do have, 70% comes from energy used in buildings. And another kind of interesting fact for Chicago is that 80% of the buildings that will be standing during our reduction goal period are already built. So that is really telling us that we need to focus on retrofitting the existing building stock in Chicago. So again, green roofs can be a very effective tool in that. And another interesting thing, which it sounds like it's very similar to Portland's, is we have adaptation. A lot of the goals and actions associated with our climate action plan are how we're going to adapt to climate change that is already going to occur due to the carbon that's already in the atmosphere. So green roofs play a very active role because in Chicago, we're going to see more frequent and heavier rainfall events. and it's going to be during periods of the year that we don't want to see rainfall. So we feel that green roofs and their ability to absorb stormwater are a really important tool in preparing for climate change that we will see despite what happens globally. Another multi-year, this was a multi-agency and departmental process where we called it Adding Green to Urban Design. Our goal was we wanted to look at ways to optimize the environmental benefits of our urban design in Chicago. And we looked at everything outside the building. We felt LEED, pretty much covered everything that's going on inside the building. But at that point, especially, this was 5 years ago, they weren't really looking at a lot of the exterior. So we looked at, the rooftops, the facades of buildings, all the way to the center of the street. So how can we build better streets and better sidewalks, et cetera. And the objectives were to preserve, expand, and improve the quality and function of our vegetated surfaces in that realm of the city, capture, clean, and reuse as much rainwater as possible in the city, anything that contributes to better air quality and improving quality of life. And some of the key strategies that came out of that process were that we did increase the green roof requirements in our policy. We were at that point requiring 50%, 25%, 10% of the roof be covered in vegetation. Back in 2008, we increased that. So you saw earlier that now we're requiring 100% of the roof, 50%. I think 50% is the smallest amount that we do require in terms of covering your roof with vegetation. We also had all of our departments that have landscaping plans or build landscapes. They created a sustainable landscape standard for all of their projects. We created an urban forest agenda for the first time with the city. And we started looking at, we've had a landscape ordinance in place since, I believe, the 1980s. But we wanted to look at have more context-based regulations and look especially more performance-based. So we were looking at Seattle in particular, the Seattle Green Factor. And what's interesting is that we've spent the last couple of years looking at projects, and between the Sustainable Development Policy and our new Stormwater Ordinance, you combine those, that we actually score, we exceed the scores that are required by the Seattle Green Factor. So we haven't really gone further in terms of implementing a more performance-based landscape ordinance, and I'm sorry, I should have thrown in the landscape ordinance too. So the landscape ordinance, the Sustainable Development Policy, and the Stormwater Ordinance, all three of those being applied, our projects are scoring very high. So we have decided not to go any further with those. So after, that's been happening for about the last 10 years in Chicago, we wanted to see how effective they were. So we bought satellite imagery from the fall of 2010. It was multi-spectral 8-band technology. It was really cool satellite data. And what's neat about the 8-band is previously there were 4-band, meaning the number of colors on the color spectrum that they were using. We were only the second city to use the 8-band technology, and why we wanted to use that is because we also wanted to look at the health of the green roofs that were constructed. So we wanted to know how many green roofs there were, what the square footage is, and the relative health of those green roofs. So we thought we had, the grooviest data available at that point. So what we got is this satellite imagery of all of the vegetation in the city. So the first thing that we had to do was apply our building footprint data layer so we could actually identify the vegetation in the city that is on the rooftops, not in our parkways or not a street tree, et cetera. So they applied this building layer, and then they did all of this really cool manipulation. They used all these cool formulas that scanned the entire city that helped identify, vegetation that could be on a rooftop, and then they had to do a lot of manual manipulation in the end. So I feel really comfortable that this data is pretty accurate. And in the end, it identified green roofs. And this is kind of a fun slide because it shows how our green roof policy kind of evolved. This is the Target store on Randolph. And you can see that the requirement was only 25% of the roof, and that's exactly what they did. They didn't do a square foot over 25%. And this is a condominium where they did 50% of the roof, and the rest of that is mechanicals because it's 50% of the net roof area. So they can subtract out any areas that were used for swimming pools or mechanicals, etc. And then this is a large multi-use project, and you can see that the green roof requirement was 50%, and that's exactly what they did. And this is actually a plaza, which is over a underground parking garage, so they can include that in their square footage too. So in the end, what we had, we found that we have 300, and this is as of August of 2010. We have 359 green roofs. They totaled almost 5.5 million square feet. The average size was 15,000 square feet, and the median was 5,000. So Portland has more green roofs, and I'm not sure, but you can see that some of these projects are a little larger. So, and this total does include, I have to fess up, it does include Millennium Park, and Millennium Park. I hope all of you, well, if you haven't come to Chicago, please do. It's a beautiful new park in the downtown area of Chicago. It was a former huge parking lot and commuter rail station. We built a couple more layers of parking and then placed a park on top of it. It's about 25 acres. It's absolutely stunning. And because it is over a parking structure, we did include it in our green roof totals. There might be some debate on whether that really is a green roof, but we want to be number one, so we used it. And this is what's really interesting, because we also wanted to find out, where did these green roofs come from? Were they mostly voluntary, or were they because of the sustainable development policy, et cetera? What we found that 82% of the roofs that were built in Chicago were due to the sustainable development policy. So in terms of elected versus required, there were 297 were required, 62 were elective. We feel that 3 of them were solely due to the Stormwater Ordinance. Some of the projects that were required to have green roofs by the Sustainable Development Policy, I think we ended up having larger green roofs because of the Stormwater Ordinance, because there is a major credit associated with green roofs when you're creating your stormwater management plan. We feel that 17 were due to the green permitting program, and 62 were totally elective. Yes? Oh, that is really good. We didn't look at that. That is only due to that's only based on the number. So thank you. We'll look at that, because we can do that very easily. Good. So, and something that was kind of fun that came out of this is this interactive map that we now have on our city website. So if you go to cityofchicago.org and Google, just in the search engine, put in Chicago green roofs. And we do have an interactive map. So every building that was identified with a green roof has an icon, as you can see. And you can click on the icon, and it gives the address of the green roof, and then you can click on the view fact sheet, and a fact sheet actually comes up identifying the roof, the address. That's the satellite image. from the imagery. And then you can also, we have identified it in terms of its location in the city. And sorry, that's a little tough to see here. And then we also have the relative health. And, you know, I wish I could give some really great data on this relative health. What it showed is that most of the green roofs are healthy. But I'm just not real comfortable with giving hard and fast conclusions on the health, because we just need to do a little bit more research into this. We called it the NDVI. It's the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. Really complicated. And so hopefully in a year or two I can give better data on that. But at first blush, they are pretty healthy. And it did help us identify the roofs that aren't healthy. We haven't done anything yet. We don't have a lot of leverage on the projects that have already been constructed. In those plan development agreements, we didn't put in great language in terms of, you know, if your green roof dies, you know, you have to fix it up or something. So we're still trying to figure out how we're going to handle this. So in terms of the environmental benefits of the square footage and number, we have estimated that 21 metric tons of carbon are mitigated each year, and over 124 million gallons of stormwater are absorbed per year. So that's been kind of our track or our history. And now do I have time to go through a couple of projects? 5 minutes? Okay, I'll go through these really quickly. This is one of my favorite stories. Okay, so 900 North Michigan. This is Michigan Avenue, the Magnificent Mile. You got Lake Michigan over here. This is the John Hancock building. This is 900 North Michigan. It's been a high-rise residential and office building, one of the prime, you know, pieces of real estate in Chicago. They added some residential units. They took away from some of their office and added new residential, so they were required to either build new open space or pay into that open space impact fee. And they chose to build a green roof and get the credit. So they first vegetated that part of their roof. These are photos. This is actually an award-winning roof. And they, as you can see, they opened it up to their residents, both the residents as well as the commercial tenants. And they received so much positive, as you can see, you know, this building is completely surrounded by high-rises all around. And they received so much positive feedback, the building and the managers, that they decided to also vegetate the roof of their parking garage that's directly behind the building. And there you can see the image. This is the original green roof, and this is the parking garage that was vegetated after they received the impact. So sorry, I forgot I did that. And so the managers, and this took place probably 6 or 7 years ago, they found that, okay, in the building, the tenants in the commercial area, the units overlooking the green roof were being leased faster, and the leases were lasting longer than the businesses overlooking Lake Michigan and Michigan Avenue. It's just amazing that, you know, you would have tenants wanting space over there instead of looking at the lake, because there is an opening behind the John Hancock, so they do have direct views of the lake. So they ended up vegetating this part of the roof, and they did this just, I believe, 2 summers ago, and those are images of that building. So I just love that story, because they ended up doing it to get an incentive from the city, but then because of the feedback they got, they even did more, and then they found out that economically they can make more money if they even vegetate more of the roofs. So right now, almost 100% of the rooftops are vegetated. So I just love that story. The next one is the Schwab Rehabilitation Center. This is on the southwest side of Chicago, really kind of dodgy neighborhood. This is a rehabilitation center for young kids. And I went to the opening of this green roof, and it was such a heartwarming story because some of the nurses were telling me that some of the children hadn't been outside for 6 months because it was very difficult to take them outside. So they built this green roof. Oops, sorry, I don't need the laser pointer, I need this. And it's really cool green roof. It has all these pathways. It has a misting station to mimic rain, and it has a basketball court, and so the kids can go out and play. And it's just a really lovely project, and it has a great impact on the kids staying with them. And then this is my favorite project in Chicago. It's the Colmer Youth Center. Again, it's in a really dangerous neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. It's a youth center, so they have all kinds of after-school, weekend, and summer programs. They also have a really successful drill academy, and they perform all over the United States. But this roof was, and it's a beautiful building designed by Mark Ronan. He's kind of one of our starchitects in Chicago. The green roof is right in the middle of that building. Initially, it's a very thick roof. I think it varies from anywhere from 12 to 18 inches. And they started out almost all prairie plants. And they decided that they wanted to base some more curricula around the green roof. So they changed the palette of their plantings, and now 75% of the roof is food production. And they've built curricula around the green roof, and the students go up and they have all kinds of activities that are based on what's growing, and they also help cultivate. I forget what these kids are, well, they're actually planting, but they grow strawberries and all kinds of lettuce, etc. And they actually have a cafeteria downstairs, and they use everything that they grow in their cafeteria. So it's a really, really cool story. So with that, thank you very much. And again, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I really want to thank Michael, and I know that I have a lot of questions for him, and you may too. I think we'll move on to our next presentation, but at the break, I would encourage all of us to go up and ask our questions, and we may also have other time at the end of the day. Michael, you'll be here all day? Great. So I think there'll be many more opportunities to learn from him, learn what Chicago is doing, and what we might think about here.